It's season 2 of Rabbit Holes with Aaron. We're going to be trying some new things. We've got enhanced Rabbit Holes with Aaron episodes on Patreon, and also we're putting our podcast on skool.com, which is spelled Skool. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Welcome to Rabbit Holes with Aaron. I'm Aaron, and today with me I have a very special guest, Roger Schindel. He has an interesting history as a blue-collar man who became a farrier and a horse trainer and an all-around avid outdoorsman pretty much. Then he had a son and went to college, and now he started a lot of businesses, and he has requested to be on this show because he found me on a database looking for guests. So I really appreciate you being here today, Roger.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So I start with the same question. What's something new and exciting in your life right now?
The biggest thing that's new in my life is I have a company that does HIPAA compliance. It's a consultancy, and I'm actually in the process of selling it to my partner. So I've moved away from that. I'm still active in the business, but then I've started Super PAC to address some of the ills that we have in politics today. It's nonpartisan and is trying to, we call it Volunteers for Democracy's Future, and we're trying to repair democracy.
Wow. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of places that need to be repaired. I mean, and not even speaking on a side, on a partial, like you said, bipartisan. Speaking from a bipartisan place, it's like, yeah, everybody is always noticing problems. What problems specifically are some of the ones that you guys are tackling?
Well, our big one is looking at individuals who don't stand up to their oath of office to protect the Constitution from foreign or domestic enemies. And also, we focus right now on the Senate, but the whole Congress has abrogated their Article 1 responsibilities to the executive branch. It's been going on for years. It isn't a one president issue. It's sort of come to the head in this presidency, but it's been going on probably since the 60s. That's what
Okay.
we're trying to resolve or work on. And what's happened is, people don't want to vote because they don't see that there's any point in it. And you can't have democracy if you don't vote.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you, and thank you for standing up and taking care of a problem, or standing up, making a group to take a problem on head on. I
Yeah,
appreciate
well,
that.
I just got to a point where I couldn't stand by and not do anything in terms of what's going on now. And so we really need to, as I say, bring our democracy back.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you for telling me about that. Is there anything else you want me to know about it before we move to a rabbit hole?
Well, as I say, we have both a super PAC, which is involved in different campaigns for this cycle, next cycle. We call that Project 67 because we want to get a 67% seat majority of people who respect the Constitution so that we can make some changes so that democracy comes back. Outside of the election cycles, we have a second project, which we call the Accountability Project, and it looks at all the elected officials and looks at things that, like, are they living up to their oath of office? Are they, for example, trading stocks on their own with insider information? And the idea is try and put pressure on them to live up their oath of office. We have both a super PAC and a 501c4, which is more educational than it is about politics. We launched it I started working on it in January, and we launched in May. If anybody's interested, the website is number4df.com.
Okay, thank you for letting us know where to find that at. As I was listening to you and pretty much your plan and what you're putting together now, It just seems like it's a big move towards more accountability.
Well, that's why what goes on, because there is no accountability. And so we need
Right.
to bring accountability back. And the theory was the voters would be the accountability, but with all the money in politics and all the craziness that's going on, like now, with gerrymandering districts and whatnot, the voters are basically disenfranchised. They need to come back into the process,
Hmm.
hold their politicians accountable.
So yeah, so you're not only trying to hold the government kind of well, the government and the people are supposed to be the same, but you're trying to hold people a little bit accountable too to say, hey, you have a responsibility, you're a citizen. Let's go vote and vote in a meaningful way, and let's get together and vote for things we all agree on. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, we're trying to re-engage voters who are people who are eligible to vote who don't vote. If
Hmm.
you look at the stats in every presidential election, the largest voting bloc are people that don't vote. 40% of the population who can vote doesn't vote. And so to have a vibrant democracy, those 40% need to get re-engaged.
Yeah, that's the trick. I mean, well, that's the tricky part, right? That's the riddle, the puzzle of the program, getting those people to be interested again.
Well, they need to get to a point where they believe that, they have an ability to impact government that impacts their lives. And so that's sort of what we push is, if you don't like what's going on, the only way you can change it is by voting. And if you get engaged and you vote for the changes that you want to see happen.
Well,
So
I know.
we stay away from any kind of agenda except for repairing the democracy. So,
Hmm.
I'm a big environmentalist, but we don't push environmentalism at all. That's not what we're about. We're about getting voters to be re-engaged and take control of their life to sort of address the chaos that we all live through right now.
Hmm. Okay. Well, seems like a good goal. I see why you're into it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I was thinking when you said we're talking about voting a lot, and I thought recently this thought that we vote with our dollar. We vote with our dollar and we vote with our time as well. It's, voting at the poll, very important. I'm not trying to take anything away from that, but like we vote every day, all day long with the activities we participate in, with where we spend our money. What do you think about that?
To some extent, I agree with that, and I'm a diehard capitalist, but there are requirements of capitalism to be successful that we're not following, that aren't available. So, in some sense, people are. Well, let me give you an example. Whenever I
Sure.
go to the hardware store to buy a tool, and I bug my hardware vendor all the time, I'm looking for tools that are made in America. And I'm willing to spend a few dollars more on that as opposed to buying something made in China. But over the past decade, it's become harder and harder to find anything made in America. So I can't vote my dollars in terms of voting for American made products.
Hmm.
I'd like to get back to the point where you had that option.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a very important distinction because, I mean, I'm not innocent in this regard because when I got started with the podcast, I thought, well, what happens? Most of them are remote, like we're doing right now, but I thought, what happens if there's a person that I live close to that I want to have on my podcast? So I ordered a podcasting setup off Amazon that came from China, but I have to admit it was like a quarter of the cost of getting even top of the line electronics, much less electronics made in America. And I was just starting off, but yeah, that temptation's always there, isn't it? I mean, these days at least. You can go order construction equipment, anything on down to all the way down to a pin from China, and in that way we do kind of vote, but we're not voting for America. We're voting for another country. We're sending our money to another country and letting them decide what to do.
And let me give you another example because the government is involved in that. So, for example, there is a Chinese-made phone, cell phone, that the government, the Defense Department, will not allow service members to use. Can't bring it on base. And the reason is that the Chinese have hardwired in backdoors to those phones so that
Mm,
they remotely can turn on the camera, they can turn on the audio part, and now they basically can spy within military installations through these phones. And the government, while they're not allowing those phones to be used by anybody in government or the Defense Department, I think should be limiting the ability of that kind of technology to be imported into our country. So the
mm,
government, there are tons and tons of those examples. Working with HIPAA, which is what my company does, we see, for example, medical devices that have the same kind of vulnerability. And
mm.
that's where the government, I think, needs to step in because the products are not the same where it comes from China or it comes from the United States.
Yeah, they may look identical. Yeah, but that reminds me of a time when I was in the Marine Corps, and I remember finding out that we could only really own American-made vehicles, not as private citizens, not as a private enlisted Marine, but as far as for work. All we had was GM and Ford brand vehicles, the Humvee, for instance, but we also had a lot of civilian vehicles like Jeeps, trucks, Chevys, Fords, and we only bought American made for the big contracts. And I think that's the way it is in the military all the way around. I don't think it's ever going to be where we're buying Chinese products for the American military, or at least I hope it never is. But that just reminds me of that aspect that I discovered when I was in. Yeah, but you're saying more of a protective factor, more of a leadership kind of factor, which leadership is a really big and vast topic, and it applies here as well. But, you know, what do you think about what does leadership mean to you?
Leadership to me means that you don't give your power up to someone else and you stand for what you believe in, and you don't necessarily need to follow the crowd. And if you're a good leader, you'll have people that will follow you. If you're a bad leader, they won't. And part of the
Mm,
problem now is I don't think we have many good leaders. And the ethical side, the moral side, I think is out of whack. And we've gotten to a point where all anybody cares about if you're in business, really big business, is the dollars, is the profit. I used to be in the equity markets earlier in my career, and it was interesting. Companies look to the next quarter, publicly traded companies that needed to have growth in their net income, disregarding the fact that their companies were staffed by people. And if they would pull back a couple percentage points on their profit, then we would have robust wage growth. We would have a robust workforce. People would have to get ahead, but they're driven. The public companies are driven so much by needing to meet their quarterly profit goals that doesn't allow that to happen. And so leaders, who are just looking at their investors as the only group that they need to worry about, are not leading their individuals. They're the people.
yeah, but yeah, the value of human life, the value of human time. Yeah, sometimes, well, I think it's always going to be a big error to look at people as numbers. At a sophisticated, deep, maybe a super deep esoteric level, we're almost like a galaxy of cells held together by invisible magnetic forces that show light in a certain way that we can recognize another person's face and that they're human. But really, we're each different galaxies in some way of looking at it. That we and I think that relates to leadership as well. But what do you think about that idea?
I agree, and let me give you an example that came to mind that sort of encompasses this whole discussion we're having. Is Henry Ford was once asked why he was paying as a normal wage 3 times what his competitors were paying their employees. Their,
Mm,
and his response was, I need to pay my employees enough so they can buy my cars.
there you go.
And we don't do that anymore. I mean, you talked about having to buy Chinese products. Well, that's because the vendors, the manufacturers are not paying their employees a sufficient wage to adjust, the quality of the product for the price it has to be. And so there are a lot of things that I don't agree with Henry Ford, particularly his politics, but he was a leader. That's how I would define leadership: is not going with the crowd, but taking your own road. And
Yeah.
and what people don't realize, Henry Ford, he failed 6 times before Ford Motor Company became a success. People, and that's another characteristic I think of leaders. Leaders are people who recognize that the best lessons you learn are from failures, and so you let your people fail within constraints, but you have to be willing to look at failure as a positive step.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking about leadership, and it reminds me of what I've been thinking about with boundaries, because that's a big topic. And probably throughout the time there are human beings, it'll always be a big topic of boundaries and space. Maybe not just outside of our body, but I've been trying to get people to see, and I've been thinking about how when we set the boundaries within ourselves and we follow and honor our own boundaries, then that's the beginning of healthy relationships. And I think it seems to apply here to leadership as well. The leader seems to have better boundaries and higher expectations for himself, and not diminished by failure.
Right?
What
I
do you
agree
think?
with that. I agree with that. The other thing I see that we've gotten into, which I don't think it's always been this way, is people are much more judgmental. So we
Mm.
basically siloed ourselves, because we only interact with the people who believe the way we do because we judge them. If they don't hold our values, we judge them as being the other, as being, not as good as we are. And that's one of the challenges I think we have. And leadership is our leaders, I believe, are partly responsible for that, is that they gain by having everybody siloed. So
Mm.
our
Yeah.
whole culture has gotten out of whack, and it's worse with all the communication mediums we have now. TikTok, the internet, not isn't one social media channel, but all of them have made it so that information can be shared so rapidly that it can take advantage of it and modify people's behavior. That's, I think, why we have so much chaos today.
Yeah, I wonder if prosperity is our biggest problem. I've been contemplating that too, how man moves in patterns throughout history. And it seems like when you have a prosperous time period, then everybody kind of gets lazy and they take it for granted. Yeah. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Instead of prosperity, I would define it more as being too consumption oriented,
Mm.
right? We have all these things that we don't need, and people take on debt to buy, what they don't need, what they don't. I mean, you shouldn't live a life where it's just needs, where you don't have, enjoyment. But it's also part of what I was talking about in terms of products. Products are made to fall apart, right, here in the States.
Yeah.
So you buy more, you consume more because the products aren't up to snuff. And so we've become a culture that is obsessed with buying power. So it isn't the quality of what you buy, it's the quantity of what you buy. And
Mm.
that's out of hand. That's how I would interpret what you were saying about
Yeah.
ethics.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And it makes me think of the telephone. Used to have a telephone on the wall growing up. You know, we only ever had one telephone. Never had to buy a new one. And now every year they come out with a new phone, or shoot, even more often than that, depending on what kind of phone you're looking at. But yeah, so it's planned obsolescence is a big word for that just rattled around in my brain and the reason why, I'll tell you a quick story, because in the Marine Corps, when I first came in, we were still using barely post-Vietnam radio systems and communication equipment. And it wasn't planned for obsolescence. We got in there with alignment tools, we aligned modules, we went through, and that was actually my echelon of maintenance, was to align the radio and get it working again. And if the alignments failed, then you had to send it to a higher echelon repair shop to fix. But these days, there's no alignments. There's no bringing it back into tolerance. There's not making it last another decade. There's, well, it's gone, throw it in the trash.
Yeah. In some cultures, they actually engineer their products so that they can evolve. You take the parts and use them in the next version. But we don't do that here. Like you said, it's all planned obsolescence because now we buy more.
I mean, isn't it interesting that, capitalism, well, I don't have any official terms for this, but in my mind, like, capitalism is made up of consumers. And we are a nation of consumers, but we're the thing being sold now.
Yep.
Our consistent consumption of electronics and pretty much food, anything you can think of, vehicles, yeah, you might used to have got a vehicle that lasted for longer than 10 years. That's not the way it is anymore. If you have, I know a lot of people drive around 20-year-old vehicles, for sure, because they figured out that fixing it is cheaper than going and buying a new vehicle. But yeah, we're all consumers, but the irony is that we're being consumed. Our time, our effort, our money is a result of those two things, I guess, and so that's consumed as well. Wow, what do you think about that?
Getting back to your, automobile scenario, it's funny. When I was growing up, you could work on your car, right? Didn't need to be a specialist, just needed a few tools, and you'd lift the hood and you could actually climb in, to the engine area and work on it. Now, you can't even get your hands in. I mean, it is true that they're much more gas efficient and they last longer than they did. But I think something's missed because you can't get in there as just a common person and work on your car, and that's just, it's gotten to the point, for example, I don't know if you know this, but if you buy a John Deere tractor as a farmer, right? If you try and work on it yourself, it voids your warranty.
Yeah.
Okay? How does that? And that's where the government should be stepping in. I mean, how can you, sell someone a product and not allow them to work on it? Another good example is Tesla. If you buy a Tesla car and you buy the self-driving package and you sell your car, the new owner doesn't have that self-driving package. So the value of the car goes down when you sell it because that's not part of what they're buying, and because you can't sell it. In my mind, how does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, and as we point out these different examples too, I don't want to vilify. Everybody's trying, and you're not either. I'm not saying that, but I could see how I could be misunderstood to be saying, well, we just don't make good products anymore. And I'm not saying that. I'm just saying culture has shifted, humanity has shifted, and people are catering to it with different products and products from overseas. But the consumption is almost like, I wonder if it reaches like a level where there's no coming back. Like from the consumer consumption aspect, where there's no coming back, where it's got a cycle in some way. What do you think?
Well, I'm an optimist, so I always think it's going to come back. I mean, I think we're seeing a bit, with the high price of gas and the high cost of living right now. There's a lot of reporting on people modifying their behavior for summer vacations, for example. So that's modify that. But getting back to the whole capitalism thing, capitalism, to be successful, requires that you have competition. And over the past 20 years, 30 years, we've seen such a consolidation that's part of the reason why we don't have the products that we want. And we sort of have to acquiesce to what we're offered because there's no competition. You can't we're down to 2 domestic farm machinery companies. So John Deere can say you can't work on your own tractor because people can't go anywhere else. And I think that's part of and we haven't been this consolidated and had so many monopolies, since the Gilded Age in the 1890s.
Hmm.
We survived that and came back from it, and I believe we'll survive this and come back from it. The only question is, I'm not someone who believes that AI is going to take over the world. There are
Okay.
issues with it, but it does need to be controlled. It needs to be regulated. We've come to a point in our society where we don't believe we need regulation because we've been sold on the idea that regulation means socialism. Regulation is a requirement to keep oligopolies and monopolies from existing, which is what sort of keeps the free markets from working.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for bringing that optimism back again. Because, I mean, I feel like a pretty optimistic person almost all the time. My wife would definitely tell you I'm optimistic. But there's some times where I get dragged in and wondering, it's the big machinery is a little bit more complex, and I wonder, how is this working? How does it regulate? When does it come back around again? But I also believe, like yourself, that it will, and that humans will still be around, and nothing breaks too in too big of a way as far as human systems goes that we don't realize and regulate and fix it at some point, right?
History is nothing but the pendulum going from one extreme to the other. So I would hope we could figure out how to not go to the extremes. But
Yeah.
I mean, I have hope that it will self-adjust. I mean, society is pretty much a self-adjusting system. It's a question of what is it that triggers that adjustment.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a riddle. Or we're waiting to see, or we're trying to be a part of what that change is. Well, and I was asked that question in the last podcast episode I recorded as well a few days ago. I was asked, what do you think is going to bring these two sides together creatively? It was from a movie executive, and he asked that question. And, we went through different answers, like maybe it's going to be a good story, or maybe storytelling is an important aspect that's missing from our lives. Good conversation, obviously, is missing from most of our lives in day-to-day life. And then I eventually settled on my same answer, and that's listening. Listening is going to be the thing that turns everything around. And that's how things are so polarized now, in my humble opinion, is because nobody's listening and everybody's yelling on whatever amplification devices, if they can, bullhorns or whatever they can find. They're yelling, making all the noise they can, and I'm not targeting any particular group, but you hear it everywhere. Or if they're typing, they've got 15 exclamation points after what they type, and it's all caps, and it's just like, what do you think about listening? How do you think that would work?
I agree that we need to listen and not be judgmental. But for me, the core item that needs to happen, I mean, you were in the military, so you came from one society and were put into a melting pot where you had to deal and listen and interact with people from completely different backgrounds. And I think to get this country to come back together, and my friends who went through the whole Vietnam era with me are probably going to have a different point of view, but I think that we need to have required government service for say 2 years. Doesn't necessarily be the military. It can be something else. There are a variety of things this country needs to have done, but we need to get people out of their comfort zone and out of their silo and find out about other people. Because without that, we're just going to keep being more judgmental. And when you're judgmental, you don't listen, right? Because you don't have to. So I'm a big proponent of 2 years of required government service.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you sharing that idea with us and with the listeners as well. Yeah, I thought of a story. Gosh, I'm blanking now. I should have taken a better note. A story about a video. Gosh, Gosh, I'm going to have to return to that point. I lost my point completely. Well, it happens sometimes. But yeah, so we were talking about enlistment, and we're talking about what makes it right, and listening, storytelling. Well, I should have taken a better note. I'm not getting it back. But yeah, I appreciate the positivity idea and the suggestion.
I think one of the things that's made me successful in my career is, I've been a horseshoer, I've been a cowboy, I was a deckhand, I've worked in factories, I've had really awful jobs, but I've also talked at conferences for the World Bank, and I can go into any room and talk to anybody because I've had this, wide breadth of different experiences. And I think that's the one trait, characteristic I have that I think is missing in a lot of people, in that they've done the same thing over and over again. I mean, that would drive me crazy. I've done so many things because I'm always interested. Once I figure something out, it bores me. I move on to the next thing. But that's, I think, what our society needs. I mean, how do you feel, for example, about our educational system, which seems to have turned into we're going to train people for jobs instead of training people to think? And what's your thought on that?
Well, thank you for that question. That brings up a really interesting thing. A video I watched the other day, a person, I don't remember their name, but they had picked up a math book from before the Great Depression. And chapter one, it was, what was it? It was like a fifth grade math book, I believe. And you opened it up, and chapter one was how to find and pay your employees well. Chapter two was how to market your business. And this is like a fifth grade math book. They were oriented, and they were just opening it up, flipping the chapters. Didn't even have to read anything. And I was absolutely floored that you're right, that we're training people to be minimum wage employees through our school system. Not every school, but generally the public school system. And they're not even shy about it anymore. They're like, well, we'll train you to be a nurse, or we'll train you to be this, or we'll train you to be a welder, or we'll train you to be an automobile mechanic and give you some skills to get you ready. And it's like, they're not training you to own your own business or hire employees or think about whether you can do a business and it's profitable or not, or your ROI, or how to balance your checkbook. Nobody even has checks. But yeah, you got me going on a roll there. But
We
what
don't
do you
we,
think?
we don't teach critical thinking, which is one of the reasons I think we're so divided. And with the internet and all the social media channels, people can't assess what's real and what isn't, right? And because we don't teach those critical thinking skills. When I went to college, I started out as a scientist. I was a physiologist, graduate school as an economist, but we learned how to think about data. And I'm always amazed at the people I run into who can't critically analyze anything. And if you can't do
Yeah.
that, you're just being fed. I mean, you're being manipulated if you can't do that. And I challenge the school systems for making that happen.
Yeah. I mean, our students don't even compare with a host of other, you know, first world country students in tests. I hear, when I read a book about it, I'll try and bring it to mind, the name of the book, The Limitless Mind, I believe. And it was geared towards education. And it was talking about Japan. This particular story was about Japan, and they just go and write a problem that none of the students can solve on the board, and they give them the day to solve it, and they've got to work together, and they've got to, use their computers, and they got to just figure it out. And they're trying to change, this book at least tries to change schools in America to say, if you're not struggling, your brain's not learning anything, come see me, and I'll give you a harder problem. And so many, and I think about my childhood, and we're talking about the 1970s and early 80s, it was a lot of repetition, but man, I can add numbers faster than, most other people, because of the practice and the repetition of reading, writing, math, arithmetic, division, long division, short division, square roots, and I'm sure it's even more amplified by your particular story, but yeah, we were taught, here's some you can figure out the area of your room, and you can do, you could maybe even be, work in people's houses as a painter, figuring area of a room, square feet, etc., length and width, and very basic building blocks. But then the word problems. Go ahead.
It's gotten so bad, and I don't know if this is a fact, but what I've heard at McDonald's, right, they don't have dollars on the cash register, right? It's pictures of whatever's being bought
No,
because
no.
people can't even make change, right? I
Yeah,
mean, how
yeah,
do we
no.
explain
We've all got plenty of those stories.
so, and
What?
then you add to that the whole AI and offshoring of support. I mean, my company, my consulting company, I always tell my partner, sometimes I get frustrated because we spend so much time and money on support. When every day I run up into the wall of just awful support. People don't know
Like,
anything about automated phone lines, on, and it's just I don't know how people survive. Well, they survive on that because, as I said, there isn't a whole lot of competition. But I think people yearn for personal interaction, and that's one of the things I think will change. This whole idea.
well, yeah, and I'm glad we're optimistic about that, because actually I have to report back with data that I have experienced, like calling AT&T, and T, and maybe it's all the phone companies, I don't know, but that's my phone. I called them and I actually got a human that actually could help me for the first time in my life the other day. So, and I've called Geico, my insurance company, and I guess I can throw their name out there, because to me, I was impressed that I got a human that spoke English, seemed like an American from my country, that understood what I was asking for and helped me immediately and effortlessly. And so I've seen customer service kind of rotating around. I don't know what changed it. Probably I voted with my dollars enough in that way, or we all have, I've seen it changing slightly. I don't know why on the big picture, but I'm glad we're optimists, because I'm really starting to see small changes in the customer service area. But I wanted to change customer service around the world, and the only way I saw that I could do that was by changing myself. It's the golden rule, right, of customer service. It's like, if you want good customer service, then give good customer service to your customers, or to anybody that ever calls my cell phone that's a real human. I'm going to give that level of customer service, like the warm handoff. You know what? I don't work. You got the wrong number. I don't work on diesel engines, but I do know a guy in my town that works on diesel engines, and I can send you a link to his website. And they're like, wow, who are you again? So it's in that way, the golden rule of do unto others is what as you want them to do unto you, which has launched me into, I wanted reviews for my business. So I just went, every time I went to a business, I gave them good reviews. And when I say good, I don't just mean 5 stars, great, excellent work. I gave them the things they did well and a couple things they could work on, and 5 stars. And so I started working on that, and I really, it didn't work out yet that I got a lot of good reviews, but I did get 15 5-star reviews over the course of a couple years. So it's kind of a counterintuitive method. What do you think about it?
Well, it reminds me of a line from Bo Diddley's song, which is, before you accuse me, take a look at yourself.
Which takes us back.
But I mean, that's the whole point. You have to, look at yourself before you can, evaluate other people and internalize it. I think that's what you're saying. But if I can ask, what kind of business are you in?
Well, I started a pottery workshop business. I started an LLC, and it was kind of a niche thing. Nobody else was doing it. I just picked up pottery and started working on it out of my counseling degree. So I went to a place for my internship called the Art Station in Fort Worth, and they actually were training art therapists. But because I was in the counseling therapy world, and I was interested in art, I went ahead and did that internship for my counseling degree. And it taught me a lot, and I fell in love with pottery. And I came out of that and I said, pottery can do all the therapy, and I don't have to worry about the ethical requirements if I am a pottery instructor and not a counselor. And so I started a business that would go into people's homes and teach them hand building skills, and they would end up in a couple of weeks with pottery they had made for themselves. And it was really, it wasn't lucrative. It was a good part-time gig, $15,000 a year, where I was interfacing and getting to see people and bring kind of a mindfulness therapy with pottery into their life. Jill always tells people I'm a stealth counselor because they think I'm teaching a pottery workshop, and I do, and I am. I'm a master instructor in the Marine Corps, so I came with the skills, the ability to put the cookies on the bottom shelf so that anybody from 5 years old up to 100 or 1,000, I don't know, can learn to use their hands to make pottery in some way. And it was just a good experience, and it brought a lot of joy to a lot of people. And it paid for little things that I wanted on the side for myself. So thank you for asking that question.
Very nice.
Yeah. And it's sitting in storage, and when I get back from my travels, maybe I'll do it some more. I made a lot of good organic connections. There's a few libraries in the area that want me to teach pottery every summer, and they've always got a backlog of people signed up to do it. So I guess I'll be doing that for a while in my life at least. But yeah, it was fun. And I saw how easy it was from a Marine's perspective. I bought 50 pounds of clay, a used kiln, and 2 bottles of glaze, and I started on the quest to make my own coffee cup for myself. And I ended up making about a couple hundred that just didn't meet the cut because exactly what I wanted. But I'm refining. One day in about 20 years, I probably will be done, and I'll have reached the goal of making my own coffee cup. But I want to switch to another rabbit hole real quick because I saw there's something else I was thinking about completely in a different direction, like that every child experiences a different family. So I have 2 brothers, and to each of my brothers, they experience a different set of parents, a different environment in the home, pretty much a whole different childhood than I did. And I'm only finding this out now that we're all talking and reflecting back on those times. But I heard that every child experiences a different family, and I want to jump to another rabbit hole all across the world and say, and I wonder if each of us experience a different world in that.
So if I can ask, what's the age difference between you and your siblings?
Sure. I'm the oldest, and and then my middle brother's 2.5 years younger, and then my youngest brother's 4.5 years younger. So developmentally, math changes, but now we're pretty much in the same area.
I only ask because in my family, myself, my brother, and my older sister were all born in sequences of 18 months. So we're all pretty much together. And then I have a younger sister who was born 7 years later. And she clearly came into a different.
Yeah. You got any, if you have any or think of any funny or scary or good stories, those are always going to be open season. And you made me think of one that I've been sharing recently, a really brief story. I was visiting my mom recently because we're getting ready to go to Thailand, and we've been visiting and spending time with family in a really focused way. And my wife traveling with me is a beacon of light. She's a gem because she asks people that I've known my whole life questions, and I get new stories that I've never heard before. Well, and we were sitting down with my mom, and she was like, "You saved your brother's life one time." And I was like, "I did? Why?" No, I'm just kidding. I didn't ask why. That's an older sibling joke. But I did, and she was like, "Yeah." She's like, "You nonchalantly, you were walking by me to the bathroom at the pool, and you said, 'Hey, I think Ben's drowning.'" And then I went to the bathroom, and she was like, "Ben drowning?" As a mom would. And she jumped in the pool. Apparently, he was only 4, and he didn't realize that we were in a different pool, and this pool had a deep end. And so he was just going to jump in, hit the bottom, bounce up like he always does in the 3 to 5 foot area. But this time it was 10 feet deep, so he didn't. I don't know if he got to the bottom or not. But anyway, she got him out. He didn't even breathe in any water. But yeah, that's the story I had. What do you got?
Well, the one that comes to mind is when I was growing up, my brother, we're outside playing, throwing a ball back and forth. And those were the days when everybody had phone lines and power lines and they were on poles. And he was throwing the ball and it hit one of the power line poles. And right as it hit the pole or the line, my father came out and said, "Bet you can't do that again." So my brother, being my brother, picked up the ball, threw it, and hit it again. His name's Larry. That was Larry.
Okay. Was it your
Always
older brother or younger?
younger brother. Yeah, younger brother. I have an older sister, younger brother, and a younger sister. Well, I don't have an older sister anymore. She passed this holiday season.
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that. Were you guys close?
We were, but she was ready, and she'd been ill, and she got to spend a lot of time with her grandkids, and so she was ready to go.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes, yeah. I mean, I think we extend life too long with medicine. Make people go through issues they shouldn't have to deal with.
Yeah. Well, that's why I want to live to be 120. Because then there'll be nobody else around that even knows me, and I can die in peace without people having to keep me alive on life support for 25 years. Be like, what does this chart say? Yeah, he says do not resuscitate. Okay, pull the plug. Let's get him out of here.
Exactly. Interesting. My lifespan, I want 103, so not quite as much as you, but 100
103. Okay.
seems like a good life if my body holds up. I mean, all those years of shoeing horses did a fair amount of damage to my back.
I've heard that.
Well, funny story. When I was shoeing, I see these old guys who were shoeing, and they could barely stand up anymore and whatnot. And as I got older, I realized they were only like late 40s, early 50s.
Oh my goodness.
I thought they were, ancient. But that's what that kind of. Although I've been watching some videos lately, and horseshoeing has changed now. They use a lot of tools that we never had or never used. It takes some of the strain off your body.
Good.
So, yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Well, that reminds me of the Marine Corps. So when I was first in the Marine Corps, I went in 1992, and when I was first in there, they changed from sit-ups to crunches because it was better for your back. With sit-ups where you had your hands behind your head and you're kind of pulling your neck with your elbows towards your knees, and now you still have your knees up and your feet on the ground, and your partner sitting on them, but you have your arms across your chest around your pretty much over your abs, and you come up to your arms touch your knees. So they changed that. They changed a lot of things in the Marine Corps to make it so you could actually make it to 20 years.
Yeah. So let me ask, I mean, if you're willing to answer, I mean, what's your thought about women in combat?
Well, I'd have to say I'm woefully short on data. I mean, other than a few Hollywood movies and just knowing that women can, I haven't experienced any combat zones where there was women. I mean, I know the Marine Corps pretty much, at least during my 20 years, never had women in frontline forces. So, which actually brings up an interesting story, although it doesn't really answer your question, because I don't really have an answer that I would feel comfortable and knowledgeable enough to answer. It wouldn't even be, I don't even have an opinion for them because I base that on the data I read. But the story is, we were stationed in Al-Qaim, Iraq. It was an old train station. It was all guys, as far as the eye could see. I mean, my unit was an infantry battalion. I was responsible for fixing the radios. And I can answer whatever question you want me to answer about that time period. But I remember one day coming out of the lodging where I was staying at and seeing dots on the horizon. Just a dot. I knew it was a human. And in my brain it said, that's a woman. Of course, we'd been away from women for six months, not even seen a woman. I've maybe talked to my wife on the phone, but other than that, like, very little involvement with the female persuasion. And I was like, what are you talking about? Those are dots. It's probably guys. It's all guys here. I'm talking to myself. Then I end up going to the chow hall for lunch or whatever. It was midday. And sure enough, here comes a couple of women. They were army dog handlers. And in a move of wisdom and good leadership, they kept them on the very far edge of the base by themselves. I didn't even know they existed until that day, and we'd been there for 3 or 4 months. So, yeah, but it's interesting what your mind can pick up at any range, maybe because of the lack of that particular frequency or whatever. I didn't smell anything. I didn't see anything that made me think it was a woman, but those dots turned into women somehow. So that's my story.
A mirage, huh?
It wasn't a mirage. I didn't know. I knew they were humans, but I didn't know they were girls. So, but yeah, that was an interesting time period too. Yeah, we had Navy SEALs on our base. We didn't even know it until they came over to the tech shop and asked for a favor. And what do you do when a Navy SEALs ask you for a favor? You do it, and you do it with a smile on your face, especially if you're a Marine. It's like, the Navy SEALs need what? Like, yes.
That's nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
fond memories of your service?
Do what now?
Fond memories of the time you spent in the Marines?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I had a really good 20 years. I had enough. I had enough of it. I learned everything I could from it, and then of course, everybody has to face that part where, for military service, when war breaks out and when American forces are needed elsewhere in the world, then you come back, and you're gone so often that you come back and you see your kids at different heights every time you come back. Like, they start off at about 2 feet, and then you come back the next time and they're 4 feet. You come back the next time and they're 5 feet and fully grown or whatever, and getting to be teenagers. And that's when I decided at 19 years to go ahead and put in a package to retire at 20. And then, yeah, I did get to spend a lot of time with him after I retired. So it worked out that way. But yeah, that was a high cost. And I can talk. Memorial Day was just yesterday, as a matter of fact. But I can talk for a moment on the high cost that most people don't realize. Yeah, there's a cost of I could die. There's the cost, but there's the cost of family, the wife and the children bear. Whether I die or not. I mean, coming back different, just being gone. It's big tree trauma for daddy to be gone for 6 to 9 months, much less an army deployment of 15 months. So there's the high cost is bore by the family and the kids. The service members, yes, yeah, we get cool new scars. Maybe my back doesn't quite work as good as it used to. I'm not immortal anymore, but the VA's here and is taking care of me, and I got to go to college for free. I even started my LLC for free. So the benefits of, service are still out there and still very abundant, especially if you're in a good location. So, an estate that favors veterans. Well, really, I think it depends on how far you are from a military base. Because military bases, people get in trouble. Young Marines are doing stupid stuff all the time. Probably every branch, but I'm familiar with Marines. But yeah. Was there anything in there you want to chase down or ask about?
Yeah, just curious, what do you think about, more people serving in the service? I mean, it's such a small sliver of the population that's in the military. Back to my conversation about, people need to do service to get out of their comfort zones and whatnot. I mean, how do you think about that? I mean, maybe not.
Yeah, no. I think it's a good idea. I mean, and it's happening in smaller numbers than what we're talking about already. We're just like myself. You see the benefits, you see the training. I didn't know what I wanted to do in my life, and I joined the Marine Corps. I learned a whole set of skills. I learned to be a good leader, management skills. I learned how to fix radios, electronics, which we really don't do very much anymore in society, but you gain a whole host of skills to start your life off with. So I'm always going to support, young people joining the military, before they decide what they want to do with their life for a couple years. I know that Israel does that, or at least it used to, and it everybody, if everybody serves and everybody understands like a foundational level of what it means, what freedom means, what sacrifice means, what leadership means. There's so many discipline, there's so many lessons there. So I'm with you as far as making it mandatory. Of course, I don't understand laws or how they would do it in the country, but I think it could be beneficial to make it a little bit more mandatory in some way. I know when I was a youngster, and I'm sure you can share your stories too, that I went in and signed up for selective service, when I turned 17 or 18, and it was something my dad did too. So it was kind of like a family tradition almost. My family for generations has served in the military, Army, Navy, and Marine Corps. So, but yeah, what do you think about that answer?
Oh, yeah, I agree. They passed the selective service law. They could pass it for everybody. They could expand it. Like I said earlier, I think it's a good thing. I think people need to get out and see people that they didn't grow up with. That's the only way you're going to relate to other people, right? If everybody is always in your cadre, it's tough to relate and not judge other people. So I think it's something that we should be doing.
Yeah, I like a lot of aspects of it too that I just thought of, like the diversity aspect. Like, we didn't see color, race, or anything else. We were all, I joked, and I might get in trouble for this, but probably not. I always like to say we all got treated like black people in the 50s in the Marine Corps. So it didn't matter what color you were, you got treated, in a way, in kind of a harder way that taught you your limits, taught you to listen and pay attention. I mean, there's so many valuable lessons there. But of course, wouldn't ever support abuse or mistreatment of people, or hazing. That's gone away a long time ago. But there is something, I think they call it trauma bonding anymore. But you form a new family, you form a new community and a new group focused around a noble effort, around service, around sacrifice. I think anytime a person finds himself wandering into a place that teaches you that much, I think it definitely is something to pay attention to and invite more people into. I mean, if we did it, the Marine Corps wouldn't look as good because we always meet our recruiting goals somehow. Year after year, famine, hardship, war, peacetime, we always meet our recruiting goals, and the other services struggle, and it makes the Marine Corps look good. But if you made it mandatory, then I guess maybe it would be like when the draft happened. I have a friend who's a Vietnam veteran as well, and maybe you can speak to the draft and stuff like that as well. But the draft happened, and he was like, "You automatically go into the Army?" He's like, "Well, I don't like not having a choice. Can I go into the Marine Corps instead?" Because the draft pulled people into the Army automatically. But you could choose to go into the Marine Corps instead. What do you know about the draft, or do you have any stories?
Well, I turned 18 in 1969, so it was the height of the Vietnam War, and there was a lot of objection to the war. I
Sure.
was fortunate or not, depending on what side you're on, but they implemented the lottery, and I ended up with a very high lottery number, so I didn't have to
Okay.
worry. But yeah, I have mixed feelings about that having happened. I mean, I can look back and think, well, maybe I should have served, but I've known a lot of guys, who served in Vietnam, and I don't think any of them would ever say, glad I did that. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I also would mirror something else that I've heard. I heard a story where a dad said, "I served and I gave 20 years so that you, my children, wouldn't have to." And maybe I took that first so you wouldn't have to, and maybe you probably have family members that would say the same thing to you if they were still alive. Like, "Hey, I went to Vietnam or I went to World War II. I faced the hardships. I came back and I wanted to give you a few other choices." What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, my family served through Korea. Like my father was
Okay.
in the Army, World War II. My grandfathers were both in the Army, World War I. Had uncles that served in Korea. Some got injured. I don't think any of them died in combat, but Vietnam just kind of turned everything. And I think
Yeah,
it turned back after 9/11.
yeah, yeah. America really, well, and we're optimistic, so it's good to have a good story where America was like, man, we don't like how people got treated from the Vietnam War. So when Desert Storm happened, I was a witness. I'm sure you witnessed it. And even to this day, when I came, well, I'm going to fast forward to a story, my personal story. When we come back, we always came back through Maine, and people would be lined up down every single part of that airport, welcoming us home, handing us a candy bar or a soda or bottled water, like thank you, shaking our hand, looking us in the eye. I almost get a little emotional now thinking about how powerful it feels to feel like America appreciates your service. And Vietnam veterans didn't have that, you know. But the course got righted. And now, my entire experience was not getting spit on. Now, I don't know, there might be pockets in America where, you can show up in your dress blues and people throw fruit at you. I'm not aware of where those areas are. But by and large, you just feel a, a whole different level of an acceptance and appreciation. And then, of course, to continue my story a little bit further, you retire and they figure out how broken you are, and then they pay you for it for the rest of your life. And then they take care of your health care, my health care, dental, vision. I'm 100% disabled through the VA, but all those things are taken care of now. I mean, that's millions of dollars in today's economy. If I live 10 years, and then if I get cancer, they'll work on me, or I break my leg, they'll work on me, and so yeah, I guess I just want to return the gratefulness that America has shown to all of us as veterans. But thank you for asking me that.
Yeah. Well, I think America sort of made amends for Vietnam when they put up the memorial, and now I have a friend who, a couple times now, has gone on. I forget what they call them, but they create groups that fly people in, to go to the Vietnam Memorial and have a day of remembrance and appreciation. So, I mean, it's a shame what happened when they first came back, but that's kind of where the
Yeah,
country was. And part of that was everybody felt like they'd been lied to. I mean, you had Nixon lying, you had OBJ lying and about the war with Kennedy. So, yeah, different time.
yeah, yeah. Different time, a different whole world, a different whole country. Yeah, and it changes more every day, for sure. Well, yeah. Thank you for the time you've given me, Roger, and the interesting conversation. You weren't wrong, at least from my perspective. It was so good to be able to talk to you and get to know how you see the world. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I appreciate you having me, and I'm always open to do it again.
Was there any other shout out you wanted to give to an organization or to one of your own organizations?
Yeah, again, I'd like people to go look at Volunteers for Democracy's Future, the number 4, df.com, see what we're doing. We're always looking for people to join us in our goal. As I said, we're bipartisan, and we just think the country needs to heal. Politics needs to heal.
Yeah, and for all of the listeners, you can scroll down in the comments and you'll see a link to his website. And yeah, and thank you to all the listeners for tuning in, for taking a chance, for listening to this conversation once again between two pretty much strangers as we get to know each other better. And hey, go out there and have a conversation with somebody and listen, you know? So, yeah, see you next week.